Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus said to the disciples, "The kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the laborers for the usual daily wage, he sent them into his vineyard. When he went out about 9 o'clock, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and he said to them, 'You also go into the vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right.' So they went. When he went out again about noon and about 3 o'clock, he did the same. And at about 5 o'clock he went out and found others standing around, and he said to them, 'Why are you standing here idle all day?' They said to him, 'Because no one has hired us.' He said to them, 'You also go into the vineyard.' When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his manager, 'Call the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and then going to the first.' When those hired about 5 o'clock came, each of them received the usual daily wage. Now, when the first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received the usual daily wage. And when they received it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, 'These last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat.' But he replied to them, 'Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to this last the same as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I am generous?' So the last will be first, and the first will be last." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
You may be seated. It's hard to imagine how different the kingdom of heaven is compared to earth, even though we have all these parables in the Bible trying to give us glimpses of how it's different. The parables that Jesus tells us aren't meant to be clear-cut, even though sometimes it seems that way, especially with phrases like, "the last will be first and the first will be last." Seems pretty clear-cut, right? This phrase, though, is really telling us what it is like in heaven. That the way that we live right now and how things on earth are will be upended. What might be commonplace to us is drastically different in heaven. God's love is so powerful and so incredible that there is enough love to go around to everyone, not just those who have worked all day and deserve or have earned God's love. So let's jump into the good news really early in the sermon this morning. You are already loved by God. Period. You don't have to do anything to earn God's love. Saved by grace through faith, right? That is what this means. We are already loved by God. Now, the world that we live in doesn't really function this way, however. We often have to do something in order to earn something else. But Jesus is essentially saying, what if this wasn't true? What if God's grace is enough? What if the love of God is sufficient and unearned? Because it is. That's what Jesus is telling the disciples. Jesus has just had to keep teaching about it over and over again because it's so generous, God's love, that it's hard to wrap our minds around. All the workers, regardless of what time they started working, received the daily wage. A wage that hopefully, when added up, is a living wage. And here, Jesus is teaching again about justice and God's unfailing love. All people deserve a living wage, enough to be able to rest and trust in that message, in that love of God. And as Christians, we pray that God's kingdom come to earth as it is in heaven. And if we are believing in what we are praying, we are called then to be part of the action that must take place to create God's kingdom here on earth. I don't know about you, I'm assuming that a few of you resonate like I do with the workers who saw all the others getting paid more for less work and thought they'd probably get paid more than the others. I could imagine the thought process. Wow, that's so generous of the owner to give them this daily wage when they didn't work as much as we did. I wonder how much we will get if they got the full day's work. Maybe the owner will double ours. Maybe the thought process was, why is the owner paying them so much for their work? We haven't been here all day. We better be getting paid more than them. I've worked so hard. Doesn't he recognize how hard I've worked? And now, although the second example is more destructive than the first, they both seem like pretty reasonable thoughts, simply based on how society functions in their day and age, and still in ours. What if, however, we lived in a world where generosity was celebrated, where our mindset didn't go into an us versus them mentality when making observations or, more realistically, assumptions about others? In seminary, we were required to take a course on ethics, which makes pretty good sense for a pastor to have some ethical background. We discussed many of these hypothetical situations where you try to decide between saving one person or saving the whole group, like the trolley problem. And if you're not familiar with the trolley problem, go look it up. Not right now, when you get home. And of course, those questions are challenging, but they aren't meant to have a definitive answer, but rather provoke discussion about the worth of human life. So when we get into an us versus them mindset, we are forgetting that the them that we are grouping together is just as loved and precious and cared for by God as we are. And if you've ever been in that them category, please know that that message is true. Sometimes we do that, and then instead of remembering and trying to treat the them with the love of God, we resort to thinking that we are better than them. That group that worked all day that we have worked all day and deserve more than that other group. It's a challenge to do this. Our society, like I said, isn't set up this way. And almost everything we see is trying to divide and make some other group or person other. But God calls us out of the us versus them thinking and into enough for all. A living wage provided to us by the bread of life through Jesus Christ. So today, through the love and grace of God, we baptize Logan. And Logan has been loved by God since before he was born, just like the rest of us. But today, a visible reminder will be lifted up to celebrate the love of God, the joy of faith, and the power of community. So, as community, as we promise to help raise Logan and welcome him into the Christian church, I hope that you'll remember your own baptism and that everyone belongs to God. Our living wage with Christ has already been paid. So let us rest assured in God's abundant generosity of love. Amen.